Welcome to the Fantasy Champions Fantasy Football Podcast. Here's your host, Morgan Colby and Rick Lemon.
Welcome to the Fantasy Champions Fantasy Football Podcast for the last time of the 2021 season. We will be talking about starts and sits. And for the last show of the 2021 season of the year, this is it. 2 days until your fantasy championships start. So you win your money, take your trophy. Some leagues get a ring.
This is it, man. This is it.
I'm not happy about it.
Why?
Because I love fantasy football and I don't want it to be over. Second it's over, I gotta redo everything for.
I know, me too. I actually kind of. Dang, this year's been fun. The only league where it wasn't fun for me was the home league.
It was fun for me. After week, what was I, 4-4?
I think I had like 4 players.
Yeah, I was 4-4 and I won 6 straight.
Out for the season at some point.
Yeah, I went 4-4 to start the season. I thought I was going to be mediocre again, and then I won 6 straight at the right time to end the season.
And lost in the first round.
Yep.
I feel like that's a common theme every year for your team.
Trust me, I've been trying to figure it out. I'm trying to figure out why. Because every league I'm in that I have that same record in or better, I'm in the championship.
I mean, I had a league this year, though, where I was dominant. I had 2 top 5 running backs and 3 top 7 receivers.
Yeah.
I had Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson, Stephon Diggs, and PPR. I had Eckler and Najee Harris. And I lost in the first round.
Sucks, dude.
It does kind of blow.
Is that Dynasty League?
Yeah, it is.
Oh, there you go. Well, anyway, my name's Morgan Colby. I got Rick Lemon with me as always, as we reminisce. There'll be plenty of time to do that in the off season.
Yes.
And we got a lot of stuff planned in the off season, so we're gonna refresh some stuff, come up with some new ideas. Do some good stuff for the fantasy champs in the off season. Can't wait for the draft content. Tomorrow night. That's Christmas Eve, right? I mean New Year's Eve. New Year's Eve, right?
Yes.
And they got the Georgia-Michigan game on that night.
Interesting.
It's a weird time to. I want to watch it.
I probably
so
won't be
badly.
watching. I probably won't.
Who? Alabama's playing. Who? Can't remember.
That's a great question. I don't remember.
I think it was. Dang, the college football people are like, "What the hell's wrong with you guys?"
I don't. I really don't.
I followed it like
Cincinnati.
Thank you. I followed it this year like offhand. Didn't really watch. I watched.
I follow individual players in college football, but I don't follow the games or teams.
Yeah, but anyway, should be interesting.
We're from the Northeast. We don't have.
It'll be Georgia, Alabama, and then Georgia will probably spank Alabama because they got spanked the first time.
Something like that.
Yeah, I would. I mean, hey, it is what it is.
It's kind of hard to bet against Alabama, though.
It really is. Anyway, we have starts and sits for Week 17, the final regular season show of the year, or not regular season show, the final fantasy football show of the year, regular season fantasy football. I don't know what you want to call it. The actual 21 fantasy football season, the last show of the year for that. And then starting next week, starting Tuesday and I think Thursday, Thursday, we'll do shows pertaining to the off season. So we'll probably spend the month of January recapping the 2021 season, going through some things that happened, going through some things that we enjoyed, we didn't enjoy, and league winners and all kinds of stuff. Recapping, rehashing, bringing it all back up, regurgitating, reflecting.
Yes.
All of those good words. So, and then in February, we'll probably start some draft content. So that'll be good. And we'll do a random mock draft.
We'll do something.
We'll do something.
Yeah.
So it'll be fun. But anyway, so we're going to give you starts and sits today. Before we do that, check out our website, fantasychampions.com. Follow us on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, Facebook. Just type in the Fantasy Champions, the Fantasy Champs, whatever, and you'll find us. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, or any other podcast platforms, please leave a review and share this podcast with your friends. If you're watching on YouTube, subscribe, click the bell for notifications, like, and comment down below any questions you have pertaining to your Week 17 championship matchup. We can help you.
Yes.
So, without further ado, for the last time this year, let's get started on the starts and sits. Next year, I'm going to have, like, drops. So there's not this, like, awkward transition. It's not that awkward. It's just like, let's get into it. And then I'm like,
yeah,
I feel like there needs to be, like, a sound.
There should.
Something ridiculous. But anyway, so let's start with the quarterbacks and with the running backs, wide receivers, tight ends, like we normally do. And we'll start with the quarterback position. Rick, why don't you kick us off with the start of the week?
Start of the week at quarterback, Matt Stafford. Matt Stafford, probably, if he was on your team, there's actually a good chance you're not in the championship game. Because he was really, really, really bad last week. He threw 3 interceptions, had 9 fantasy points. Was really, really bad. But he is playing Baltimore. And last week, Joe Burrow put up, 40 fantasy points against Baltimore?
Mm-hmm.
Threw for 500-plus yards.
Yep.
Four touchdowns, and one of them that got called back, so it would have had 5 touchdowns for like 500. He almost threw for like 560 yards and 5 touchdowns.
Wow.
It's insane.
No, I would say I don't think that Stafford's going to put up that many.
No, he's not. He's obviously not, but it just goes to show you that
how bad Baltimore is right now.
So they have their top 2 corners are both out, Marlon Humphrey, and I forget the other guy's name.
Yeah.
But they're both out. Their secondary is totally depleted, which was the strength of their defense. So their defense blows right now, absolutely blows. And Matt Stafford is not going to put up 2 bad games in a row like that. He did only one time earlier this year, and even then it wasn't like awful. But other than that, he's been pretty good all season. He's the QB5 on the year, which I think is a little underrated. People don't talk about it too much in the fantasy community, at least.
Yeah.
But he's having a great year. Coming off a bad week against a horrible defense. It all looks like positive signs for Stafford. And if somehow you were able to win last week with Stafford on your team, don't be dumb and petty and sit him this week. You should start
for Justin Fields or the
right.
Trey Lance. That would be a bad idea.
Yeah. For the waiver wire show?
Yeah. I'm trying to find my numbers because I mixed up my tabs and now I'm confused. So Matt Stafford, he's going up against the Baltimore Ravens, as we said. Baltimore has been giving up 19 points a game, basically 20 points a game to the quarterback position, which is the second worst in the NFL. So pretty easy matchup for Matt Stafford. And like Rick said, I think when it gets to this time of year, obviously you're in the championship, and during the regular season, I feel like a lot of times people they make their decisions and they're like, okay, well, you know what, there's always next week. And then you get to the playoffs and it gets a little bit more like, all right, these decisions are a little bit more important, but you still don't think about it that big. But when you're in the championship game, it's the last week of the season. This is the prime week to overthink every decision. Prime week, because it's the last week. You're going for the championship.
Sweating.
Rick's already asked me the same question about 6 times, wavering in either direction, because he's like, I don't know which guy to go with. And I'm like, bro, I don't know either. Go with your gut. But sometimes it's players that you don't overthink, like Matt Stafford. And he's had some not so great games and 4-point touchdown leagues. But for the majority of the season, I would say he has had really, really, really great performances. And has, if you got to the fantasy championship somehow on your 8-point performance from Matt Stafford, congratulations. I don't know how you did it. But I will say there's a good shot that Matt Stafford does come out and have a really good week this week, bounce back. Like Rick said, Joe Burrow just went absolutely ham on the freaking Baltimore Ravens last week. So There's a good shot that Matt Stafford does that same thing against Baltimore, except not 500 yards, not 5 touchdowns, maybe something more along the lines of 300 yards, 3 touchdowns, something more realistic. But I could expect a 25-point game from Matt Stafford, and that would be enough for you to win. So don't overthink it and just start Matt Stafford. It doesn't really need to be overthought, especially with the climate on the waiver wire right now, having no quarterbacks.
Yeah,
there's no reason
probably
to
have
sit Stafford.
Agreed. I'll probably have Stafford in my daily fantasy lineup this week.
Nice. Sit of the week at quarterback is Taysom Hill versus Carolina. Now, there is some speculation. He did come off the COVID list, which is why he was out the last one week or 2 weeks. I can't remember.
At least 1 week, I think.
So Taysom Hill is back, essentially. Last time he played Tampa Bay, he had 9 points. Previous week before that, 24 and 24. He's going up against one of the toughest defenses in the NFL against quarterbacks so far this year. This year, they've given up, I believe, 15 points a game to the quarterback position. So that's bottom 5 or top 5 toughest matchup. So I think for me, when you look at Taysom Hill, this is not a week where you want to roll him out into your lineup. I know he had a couple of good games to start. I know Rick has even mentioned to me when we were talking about this pre-show about how Taysom Hill could literally throw 3 picks like he did week 13 against Dallas, or 4 picks, and still put up 24 fantasy points. But there are weeks like the game against Tampa where he should have had an easy game. He did not have a turnover, and he only had 33 rushing yards and 154 passing yards, no touchdowns total in the game. If he does have a week like he did in week 13, it is entirely tied to his ability to rush and how many touchdowns he scores. Because the 2 touchdowns and the 100 yards rushing literally got him to 18, and then everything else was just icing on the cake. So, and the picks really didn't affect it at all. If you're on Sleeper, I believe the preset or the scoring, the main, what do you want to call it? The basic scoring settings have interceptions at 1 fantasy point lost.
Yes.
So, the interception's not really going to hurt you anyway. So I think against Carolina, they've been tougher. New Orleans needs a win, so that might drive Taysom Hill to a decent matchup, but I think you're talking in between the vicinity of 15 to 18 fantasy points in this game, and that might be good enough to win you a fantasy championship if you start him, but it's definitely more likely to cause you to lose your matchup if you only get 18 points out of your quarterback in week 17 in a fantasy championship. So I would sit Taysom Hill.
Agreed. Yeah, I would too. I just think, obviously, I'm nervous a little bit just because of his rushing, but I think it's probably going to be similar to what he did in the Tampa game. Maybe he scores a little bit more just because he has, instead of 33 yards rushing, maybe he gets like 50 to 60 yards rushing. But I think he's going to score around like 10 to 15 fantasy points. I don't think he's going to be able to do much in the air against the Panthers, who are a very good pass defense. And Taysom Hill is not that great, and his receiving core is horrible. Their wide receiver 1's Marcus Callaway, and their wide receiver 2 is Traquan Smith. So not exactly a great receiving core, probably one of the worst, if not the worst in the league. And you're going up against guys like Stephon Gilmore, CJ Henderson, some good players in that secondary for the Panthers. So it's just not, I don't think it's going to be that great fantasy wise for Taysom Hill. Yeah. He'll have an okay floor just because of his rushing, but I don't see him scoring more than like 15 points this week.
I agree. Let's move to the running back position, where we have Ronald Jones, the running back for the Buccaneers. This would be the second week that Buccaneers running back Leonard Fournette would be out. And the week prior with Ronald Jones getting a full workload, and I wish this guy was not on the Buccaneers and was on a team that would give him a workload, because even though he can't block for piss, he is really he's actually really good.
I know when he gets going in a game, he is very good.
Yeah, he's very good. So he played 30% snap percentage when Leonard Fournette left the game against New Orleans and came away with 7.88 yards per carry. against a game in Carolina, which you would assume is a tougher matchup as well. They don't give a lot of fantasy points up to the running back position. 20 carries, 65 rushing yards, 3.25 yards per carry, which is not great efficiency-wise, but he did have a rushing touchdown in the game, ended with 16 fantasy points. I'm happy with 10 fantasy points in PPR from a running back. So this week he's going up against the New York Jets. This is according to Fantasy Pros, this is the easiest matchup. So I keep saying so far this year, but season's over. This is one of the easiest matchups on the season for the running back position. Jets giving up 26 points per game to this position. And you're talking about a team that they gave Vaughn, I think, Keyshawn Vaughn, like 7 to 8 carries last week, but a majority of them went to...
and they pretty much switched roles where instead of Fournette and Ronald Jones, Keyshawn Vaughn took the Ronald Jones role from this season.
Yep.
And then Ronald Jones took the Fournette role. So Jones all year has been getting like 8 touches a game.
Yep.
And that's what Vaughn got this week. And then Jones took pretty much everything Fournette had, which is about 20 to 22 touches.
And so with that being said, if you say that about 75% or 80% of those 26 fantasy points are going to Ronald Jones, I'm going to say he's going to have a good week. I would go out on a limb. If they score 26 points together, it's going to be Ronald Jones getting 20 at least. So, I mean, I don't know if he's going to have that great a week. We'll see what happens. I think him getting 20 really is dependent on his touchdown upside, and Brady does not like to run it in the red zone. He loves to throw it.
They have been running a lot. I think Brady, his touchdowns have gone down the last few weeks.
Yeah, he's starting to transition to preparing for the postseason. Preparing for postseason, Brady.
Last 3 weeks, he has 3 passing touchdowns. So, I mean, they've been running it more. But.
So, yeah, I think they're going to run a good amount. They're going to get Ronald Jones opportunities, and it'll lead to him having a really great week. And the Jets suck, so I'd saddle him up.
Yeah, I would too. I think Ronald Jones is going to get, honestly, the only way I see him scoring less than he did this past week is if he gets hurt. I think he's pretty much good for 15 to 20 points. Mm-hmm. It's against the worst rush defense in the league. Chances are I'm going to go out on a limb here and say it's going to be a positive game script for the Buccaneers as well. So he's going to get like 20 carries again. It's an absolute perfect scenario for Ronald Jones. He's an RB1 this week, in my opinion. Yeah,
I agree. Why is Myles Gaskin sit, Rick?
He blows. He's also playing the Titans, who have been very, very good against the run this year. Their defense is super one-sided. They have a very horrible secondary, but a great front seven and a very solid run defense. So it's going to be hard for Gaskin, who has also been losing touches this year. Mm-hmm. First in the beginning of the season, who was the running back on the Dolphins at the very beginning of the season?
I don't remember.
Oh, why am I blanking on his name? Whatever.
There was another running back.
Yeah, there was a running back in the beginning of the year that was kind of taking carries. And then he got hurt, and Myles Gaskin was kind of just doing his thing for a while. And now Duke Johnson emerged out of nowhere, and all of a sudden Duke Johnson had 13 carries this week. And the week before that, he had 22. But that was because of injuries. But this past week, Gaskin, 100% healthy, got 4 touches total to Duke Johnson's 13.
Disgusting.
So it feels like Duke Johnson is now the starting running back, and I wouldn't start him either, by the way. They're both trash against the Titans. But if you still have Gaskin and you're thinking, oh, it's just a good week, bad week sort of thing, like it's been all year. No, he blows. He's not the starting running back, and he's playing the Tennessee Titans. So even if he gets touches, he's not going to do much with it.
Yeah, I agree. Not much else to say besides I think Tennessee so far this year, bottom 3 in fantasy points given up. So 14 fantasy points a game. They've been really, really tough against the run, stifling at times. And if they're splitting work between him and Duke Johnson, it's just going to be another 4, 5, 6 point week for Myles Gaskin. And, people who've had him on their team all year have been bouncing him in and out of their lineup. He had the 31 point game, and then 2, and then 17, and then 8, and then 14 and 15, and then 18, 19, 6, 5, 2. you just don't know what to do with Gaskin, and we're going to tell you to sit him. If he has a good week this week, man, all the power to him. And if you started him, all the power to you. But this is not a likely scenario, so I would sit Myles Gaskin as well. Moving on to the wide receiver position, we got Michael Pittman Jr. versus the Las Vegas Raiders. Is that correct?
Yes.
I always get confused because there's multiple LAs and then the LV gets thrown.
You can't keep track anymore.
Who knows? But Michael Pittman going up against he had a decent season so far. He is
ups and downs. He's
a wide receiver 19. He had a stretch earlier in the season after the Seattle game where he had 20, 13, 11, 20. I don't know if Houston's a tough matchup, but he had 5 points against Houston, then 20. 30,
no, that was
16,
a random
12.
one.
From weeks 1 through 10, he was probably a mid-range wide receiver too, which is very good for your fantasy team, especially if you drafted him in like the 11th, 12th round. After that, though, he got into some tougher matchups against Tampa Bay, Buffalo, where he had 4.
I want to say, too, T.Y. Hilton was injured during that stretch, and he came back in week 10, the exact week he started.
Right.
So he took a couple targets. I mean, T.Y. Hilton doesn't do much, but he did take like 3 or 4 targets away from Pittman. That was a big part of his game in the beginning of the year.
Right. But Michael Pittman when he's playing, he gets target share. And so against the Raiders, which is not a horrible matchup, it's a good idea to get him into your lineup and start him. I think on the season, he's been a wide receiver too. And so if if you need a flex play, this is the guy to go with. If you have, a weak spot at wide receiver too, and, you kind of been relying on Pittman, but you're a little bit hesitant in the fantasy championship, I would go with Michael Pittman in this game against Las Vegas.
Yeah, this is a weird one because I didn't look at Sleeper beforehand. So Sleeper says it's a tough matchup, but then if you go to Fantasy Pros, they say it's an 8.2 out of 10, and it's one of the best. It's one of the best matchups of the week. So I'm gonna trust Fantasy Pros on this one. Pittman has been up and down all year though, so it kind of actually makes me more confident in a weird way that he's gonna have a good week against the Raiders. I think he's due for a touchdown. Hasn't scored since week 9. And he's been good. Even when he doesn't do well, he still gets pretty good target share. There's only been a couple games, and it was earlier in the year where he wasn't getting targeted. Like last week, for example, 12 targets, 12 fantasy points.
Yeah.
If he gets 12 targets again, I think he's scoring more than 12 fantasy points in half PPR. And the weeks before that, 5 in a game against New England where they ran the ball a lot, and he got ejected in the third quarter of that game. Mm-hmm. 8 targets, 10 targets. And then 5 targets where they ran the ball a whole ton against the Bills. So if they're going to throw the ball a decent amount, chances are it's probably going to Michael Pittman. I think he's due for a good game against the Raiders.
I agree. Russell Gage is a real quick and dirty one.
What she said.
That's what she said. That's right. He kind of blows. He had some games this year where he's been decent. The stretch from weeks 12 to 15 in PPR were really good. Solid. 18, 21, 10, 23. That's a good stretch of games. Outside of that stretch, he's really been disappointing at times. And Buffalo has been probably I don't trust Russell Gage in the slightest.
No.
This should have been an easy week for him. And in half PPR and standard leagues, you're looking at Russell Gage, and he really has been crap. And so, going up against the Buffalo Bills defense, who's given up 14 fantasy points a game, this is going to be a really tough week for guys like Kyle Pitts. This is going to be a really tough week for guys like Russell Gage. And I just don't want to roll, and Matt Ryan too. I don't want to roll any of these guys out into my starting lineup in a fantasy championship week. So I would say Russell Gage is a no-go. At least for me. I don't think he's going to get a lot of work. I don't think he's probably going to get 7-8 targets, but it's going to be a tougher game. If Gage goes off, I quit.
Yeah, I don't see it happening either against the Bills, who have been fantastic this year on defense. Have a very solid secondary. Even last week against the Lions, Gage wasn't great. Do you think the Falcons even scored a touchdown in this game against the Bills?
I don't know. I have a strange. Maybe this is just the Patriots fan in me hoping that the Bills lose so we can retake the division lead. Because that would be Freaking
I
fantastic.
think whatever you're about to say is the answer is yes to that. But
Yes, I don't know that they're going to have an easy time. They probably score one touchdown.
sure. What are the odds it goes to Gage?
0%. It's probably going to go to Cordell Patterson.
Yeah.
Who, to be frank with you, would probably be the only guy I would start this week for Atlanta.
Me too.
I would say I have this feeling about this game where Buffalo just came off New England and they're like super excited. They're just like very, very confident. They're very, very excited. They're like, oh, we did it. We showed the Patriots who's boss. And they kind of got a little bit of satisfaction out of that, kind of like Bill celebrating on the sidelines after running it 47 times on the Bills and thinking that, and we saw what happened to the Patriots following that 2 straight losses and sucking. I have a strange feeling about this game that's going to be a little bit closer than people think, and the Bills might vomit on themselves like they did against Houston, which would be freaking hilarious, by the way, as a Pats fan, but that's just me. So
I think the complete opposite. I think the Bills are going to win like 30.
Probably rip them apart. This is the hardest game of the season left, so there's that.
Yeah, I mean it's also in Buffalo. I don't know, but the only thing that I could see that happening is they just beat the Patriots and they're on like a high, and then they play against Atlanta thinking they're going to cruise and then choke on themselves.
It's a fantasy football show. So let's move to the Titans. Don't start, Gage. Tell us about Dawson Knox versus Atlanta, Rick.
All right, well, I mean, same game, but Atlanta's defense is absolute chunks. They blow. They have been bad all season, and they are bad against the tight end as well. So it's a good matchup for Dawson Knox, who has been very solid on the season, especially if you compare him to other tight ends. Yeah. He's the tight end 6 on the season, and he missed 3 games or 2 games. So that's still very good, though. Last few weeks, though, he hasn't been too great. He has played the Patriots twice, though, so I think that kind of helps in the argument for him not being well. Mm-hmm. So against Atlanta, I think he bounces back. Is, to me, almost guaranteed to get a touchdown this week and have at least a decent game. Yeah,
I agree. And quickly moving to Dalton Schultz, so we can end the show on a high note here, or is that a high note? Dalton Schultz.
It's a low note for me because I got to start him in a championship.
Final time, Dalton Schultz.
No, he's been on this poor Schultz. He's been the sit of the week at tight end. Like
now, last 2 weeks he's had 22 and 20.
Yeah,
pretty good. Going up against Arizona, who has had 4 points per game to the tight end position. This is not a game where Dalton Schultz is going to go bonkers. I actually am kind of concerned about the entire Cowboys offensive passing attack against Arizona, even though they haven't been playing great. I do think Dalton Schultz could have a decent game, getting 8 to 10 fantasy points. But it's more than likely to me that he only gets 5 or 6 and completely disappoints. The chances of him putting up 20 plus points 3 straight games is not likely. I think that, like I said, I think he'll probably hit 6 or 7, end up being like a top 13, 14 tight end on the week. But if you have another option that's better and has a better matchup, I would just roll them out there. Otherwise, like if you have Knox, roll them over Schultz. But outside of that, I think that Schultz is a sit this week.
I agree.
Okay, there you go. For the final time of the 2021 season and 2021 in total, before we hop into 2022, time flies. There are your starts and sits for Week 17. Hopefully you win your championships. Hopefully you have a great week. We'll see you on the other side in 2022, guys. See you later.
Yeah.
Thank you for listening to the Fantasy Champions Podcast. Make sure you subscribe on iTunes and YouTube and follow us on Twitter @TheFFChamps.